And we are back in Acts. We are in chapter 10 today, and this is a pivotal moment in the book of Acts. Really, we're about to see the full fulfillment, the final phase of Acts 1:8 being fulfilled. And so we have seen Philip. We've seen, going back to Stephen's execution at the hands of the Jews, being stoned to death, the great persecution that arose in Jerusalem. So the disciples scatter, and as they scatter, they share the gospel. We get Philip's episode where he's in Samaria, he's sharing the gospel, and then Peter and John come down, and we see that ministry is strengthened and supported and encouraged and given the seal of approval by the church in Jerusalem. We see the Holy Spirit come on those believers. And then we focus right back on Saul. We see his conversion and him start to do ministry. And then he goes back up to Tarsus. And now we are back focused on Peter here. In chapter 10, we meet a new character in the book of Acts, a Roman centurion named Cornelius. And this is a godly and devout man. But here in chapter 10, we see the gospel is officially advancing to the Gentiles at this point. Now, it's already advanced to some Gentiles, but here we have like the official, it's advancing, and it gets its seal of approval because it's coming through Peter. One interesting note is that Cornelius is in Caesarea. Who went to live in Caesarea? Well, Philip did. Wouldn't it make more sense for just Philip? He's already there. Why does it have to be Peter? Well, Peter is the head, right, of the church. He's kind of the default head apostle. And so if it comes through, this ministry comes through him, it is immediately validated. It is immediately seen as this is the movement of God. We can trust in this. It has the full seal of approval of the Holy Spirit. So there's a reason why it's coming through Peter. All right, so in the first 8 verses, we have Cornelius' vision. He's praying, and God sends him an angel that says, hey, look, you need to go send some people to Joppa, and which is south, about 30 miles south of Caesarea, and you need to find this guy named Peter. He's staying at a guy named Simon's house. Go get him, bring him back. He's got a message from me to you. And so Cornelius is like, on it. And so he sends some guys there. Now, in verses 9 through 16, we get Peter is praying. Cornelius is praying, gets a vision. Peter is praying and gets a vision. And this is the big sheet is lowered. It's got all these animals on it. It's got all these unclean animals for a good Jewish boy on it. And God's like, hey, Peter, kill and eat. And he's like, whoa. I'm not going to do that because, I'm a good Jewish boy, and good Jewish boys don't do that. And God says, what I have made clean, don't call unclean. That is, we need to remember that. That's a key point. Here, God is not saying, I'm invalidating all of the Old Testament law. No, he's saying, what I have made clean, you need to consider clean as well. And we need to remember that. And so Peter's like, what is this talking about? Because remember, he's also hungry too. One of the reasons he went to pray is because he's hungry. He's waiting for lunch. Because it's noon for him. That's the 6th hour is noon. And so then we get in verses 17 through 23. Hey, Cornelius' men, they find Simon the tanner's house, and they're like, hey, it's a guy named Peter here. And God tells Peter through the Holy Spirit, hey, look, you need to go with these guys. I'm the one who sent them. And so Peter goes out. He's like, it's me. And they're like, hey, our master sent us. This is who he is. You need to come back with us. And Peter's like, cool, let's eat lunch and hang out the rest of the day first. And so they do that. And then they go start back on their journey the next day. And so then they show back up in Caesarea at Cornelius' house. And so Peter learns in verses 24 through 33, Cornelius tells his story. Hey, I was praying, and now we're ready. And Cornelius has gotten like tons of people. He's like, look, some dude from God is going to come, and he's going to share a message from God for us. And so he gets all his family, his relatives, gets a bunch of people ready to hear whatever Peter is going to say, because he doesn't know. He's waiting on it. And we see something very clear here is that angels don't share the gospel. People do. We do. Why is that? Well, because the gospel is for people. It applies to humanity. It does not apply to angelic beings. It just applies to people, and we're the ones that God has chosen to share the gospel. Angels will tell people, hey, you need to listen to this person, or you need to go to this place. Just like with Philip, an angel told him where to go, but Philip's the one who did the evangelizing. Here it's the same thing. Peter is the one who does the evangelizing. The angel is just helping them connect, because people, we share the gospel. Stories like this still happen today, and mostly they come out of the world where Islam is predominant. We hear stories of people who have visions where angels tell them to go talk to this person, or someone is going to come and talk to them, and that person shares the gospel with them. So, angels don't share the gospel. We do. And so in verses 34 through 43, Peter shares the gospel. He gets the vision. God helps him connect those dots, and he's like, this is applying to the Gentiles. What God has made clean, we don't need to consider unclean. In other words, there's no division. The gospel applies to everyone. This is not just a Jewish thing. This is a human thing. It applies to anyone. Anyone can be saved. And as evidence of this, before Peter's even done with his sermon, the Holy Spirit just comes on everybody. Like, there wasn't an invitation or anything. Like, no one had to walk an aisle. They just all accepted Christ as they were listening. And the Holy Spirit just comes upon them. We see that in verses 44 through 48, the end of the chapter, and they speak in tongues. Now, it's interesting here because these Gentiles, the Holy Spirit comes on them, and they speak in tongues. But when the Holy Spirit came on the Samaritans, they didn't speak in tongues. When the Holy Spirit came on Paul, he didn't speak in tongues. And we see in other places in Acts, this is not the norm. The Holy Spirit doesn't always come with the sign, the evidence of his indwelling by causing people to speak in tongues. Why are they speaking in tongues here? I think the key here is that this is the official gospel advancement to the Gentiles. And so their receiving of the Holy Spirit mirrors Pentecost. We go back to chapter 2. It comes on, every believer at that point was Jewish, for all as much as we know, and so they received the Holy Spirit and enabled them to speak in tongues so that they could witness and share the gospel. I think it's important here that Peter and the believers he brought with him from Joppa understand that they're praising God in these tongues, and so they can understand what they're saying, it seems like. But this mirrors that, and so Peter's connecting the dots. Oh, it's the same thing. That's why the sign has come, because it is like the Gentile Pentecost. Makes it more official. And then they're baptized after they already have the Holy Spirit. So in Acts, it is, again, sometimes it can be tricky to determine what's just descriptive, what are we just seeing as God is movement, he's working, but is not meant for us to like draw hard theology or doctrines out of, and what is prescriptive, what is, okay, so we need to do this, or this is the way it is for all times and all places. And I think it's safe to say that at this point, we've got enough evidence to know that a sign that you have been baptized in the Spirit, that you have the Holy Spirit, you are indeed saved, is not tongues, because it does not happen for everybody and all the time. It just pops up in a few places, and there are always really good reasons why it does. So that is why, as Southern Baptists, we don't ascribe to that doctrine that says, in order, evidence of really being saved is you speak in tongues. That's why we don't ascribe to that, because of the evidence that we have in the book of Acts itself. All right, so we've seen a very important event, and if we go into chapter 11, we'll see what happens because of this. But for us, all right, how do we need to pray for visions? Do we need to be waiting on angels to appear to us? I think for us a good application here is to be obedient and be ready. Here's the thing. Peter was ready. Why? Because he was praying. He had been going around and ministering, encouraging churches, preaching the gospel, seeing people be saved, and he was just going about his normal routine of sharing the gospel, encouraging people, praying, preaching the word, helping strengthen the disciples. Like, he's just doing his normal thing. He's being obedient and he's ready. Like, he's ready to go. He can just say, all right, let's go, because he's ready, because he's filled with the Spirit and he's already doing the work of God. Cornelius, he was ready. He was ready to receive the gospel. Why? Because as far as he knew, he was trying his best. He was a genuine seeker. He didn't have all the pieces. He didn't have all the dots, and God connected them for him, because Cornelius was seeking after God with all his heart. And God says, if you seek me, you will find me when you seek me with all your heart. We see that fulfilled for Cornelius here. And so it's to be ready and to be obedient. So when we do things like read our Bibles every day and spend time in prayer every day and make sure that as far as we know, we are doing the works that God has prepared for us. We're doing the good works of the Lord. That means we're ready. And when the Spirit prompts us, we need to be obedient. That's the example that we can take from Acts. So we need to be obedient. So remember, pursuing godliness and spiritual disciplines is not just this internal personal thing. It is a public evangelistic practice. Because Peter was doing those things, he was ready. Because Cornelius was doing those things, as much as he knew, he was ready to receive the gospel. And we need to follow their example to be ready and be obedient.